Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the UK H&I Prison Workshop Stroke Share. I'm an addict, and my name is John. The format this meeting is going to take is we've got three sharers. The first share is going to be from Darren, followed by Renee, followed by Delroy. So I'm going to hand it over to Darren. Thank you.
Thanks, John. I'm Darren, I'm an addict. We've done this workshop a few times over the last couple of years. This one's going to be slightly different, and I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed, because normally we do, it's a bit of the committee get up and we do a bit of talking, which I'm going to talk about, prison sponsorship, and try and convince the fellowship that it's needed for one, and two, that it works, and the reason why I'm overwhelmed now is because I don't have to try and convince you it works, I don't have to try and convince you of that today, because we've got a prison sponsor sitting one side and we've got a prison sponsor sitting the other side. Prison sponsorship is about because people didn't give up on it, and I'm going to talk about how I got involved in it and the need for it. And I'm going to mention how I got involved with it, and I'm going to talk about it a bit. My experience of being involved with it was through sponsorship, through my sponsor. It was a founder member of prison sponsorship, and prison sponsorship struggled. It struggled. Could you imagine in NA doing service is a little bit tough. If you come up with a new idea in NA and say we need this, you imagine how tough that is. It's like sort of 10 people think what a fantastic idea, let's run with it. And then there'll be 25 people go, well, I don't think it'll work because of this, that, and this and that. The addict negativity. And my sponsor Paul, he went right through that. He taught me so much, it was unreal. He wouldn't let it go. He was like a dog with a bone. And the reason why he was like a dog with a bone, because he knew it was needed, and his experience, and I'll share a little bit of why prison sponsorship. What do we want prison sponsorship for? And the reason why we need it is because H&I is doing such a great job getting into prisons, as you well know, and taking meetings in, and secretaries were going in prisons and they were taking in, chairs, people with clean time, people with experience, and they were going in the prisons, and there were groups of men and they were sharing their experience, and you know what it's like at a meeting, the room explodes with hope. It's like, and there's certain people in the room, they might have been in there for a swerve, they might have been in there, to whatever reason, but they can't help listening, and the seed gets planted, whether it's their time now, 2 years later, the seed gets planted. Once you've got a bit of NA in you, the using's a bit more difficult, and because, these people with hope in these meetings, every now and again say, well, what can I do, and we take in the literature, read the basic text, I'll get in that, read the literature, come back to the meeting next week, and they come back, they read the book, and they go, yeah, and they've got that little, that desire, that sort of like, we might talk about pink cloud, that sort of hope that goes on, that there's a way out. I'm in Nick, but I think there's a way out, and they sitting in the meetings, and Paul used to secretary a meeting, and they'd read the literature, and after the meeting, they'd all, with that hope, and they'd say, right, how can I do this? And they say, well, what you got to do is keep coming to the meetings. They go, well, I've read this book, and it says about a sponsor. Can you sponsor me? And because of H&I guidelines, relationships in prisons and stuff, no, secretary's not allowed to sponsor. So they'd ask the chair, and the chair's like, busy or whatever, nothing's set up. I don't know. Can we sponsor people? And what they had to say, and this is the thing I get, which sort of touches me, they say, I can't sponsor you, We've got a meeting, we've got the literature, but we can't give you the gift of sponsorship. You can't have that. So that equates to not having recovery, and so there was a need for this because of that, and a few people got together, a few different areas tried it, try prison sponsorship. They're trying to put together this new format, trying to put, how can we do this, from scratch? And it really struggled, No one really knew what they was doing or what they could do or what they couldn't do. Anyway, the beauty of NA, is when a collection of addicts get together for the purpose of recovery, miracles happen. And, in my thinking, I think they shouldn't. We should all be fighting and rowing. But they got together in a room, a few people, and they said, we need to sponsor people in prison. So they tried to figure out, I can imagine what that committee meeting's like. You have committee meetings when you know what's going on. They ain't got a clue, you know what I mean? Attack of the egos in there. Well, I know what we should do. Anyway, they got together and someone come up in that meeting and they said, right, we can do it. We're going to do it. Right? I think AA do it. They do it this way. They put these sponsor request cards in meetings in jails, and then, people in jails, they send them in, So I went, well, if AA have done it, we'll copy them, because we've had a few things off of them that seem to have worked quite well for us, So they put this card together, they sat in there and they had a few committee meetings and they put it together and they got this sponsor request card together, and this is the card that goes in jails, and it's got a couple of questions on the back. It says, what is an NA prison sponsor? An NA member with a working knowledge of the 12 steps who is able to guide you through the programme. For more information, see the sponsorship pamphlet and you will be sent this. The second question on it says, how do I request an NA sponsor? And it says, fill in this card and you'll be sent a welcome pack. So that was what was put together, and then they started putting it into action. This was back in about 2005. Anyway, I'll tell you a story about this card. They was having these committee meetings, and it was sort of working because it's new off the ground. It's like we're sort of going to make this commitment up, make that. Will you do this? Will you do that? A bit of confusion, And they had the committee meeting, monthly, and they got together. And someone in the committee went, here. I said, I've found out. I said, AA don't do this. AA don't do sponsor requests. So they're all sitting there sort of, I can imagine, looking at each other thinking, well, where did it come from? And my sponsor, Paul, he said, God-given. That's where it come from. You put a group of addicts together for the purpose of recovery and miracles happen. So I like to think this card, is a God-given card that goes into all prisons throughout the UK, and we've got the results of this card sitting here. Anyway, they put this together, they put the service commitments together, they tried to form a committee, they went to Region said, yes, a great idea, it's going to be a standalone committee, so they're going to be like the equivalent of H&I. Well, you know what it's like trying to get people to do service, it's not easy, so it really struggled, people were stepping up and, the logistics of this, because it's done by post. See, this card comes to the UK Service Office, then it comes to someone of the committee, then it goes to someone else in the committee who adds it to the log, who sends out a welcome pack. You confused already? Do you know what I mean? And so there's a lot involved in this. It's not just like straight sending letters, And when the letters come through, they're forwarded on from the UK Service Office to the committee member, the post person on the committee member, then they're sent out to sponsees. So there's a lot potentially that can go wrong, and that's what happened in those early years. That's what happened with it, and the negativity of, I'm not going to say the fellowship, I'm going to say the negativity of the disease of addiction, all right, will just crucify it. It's like I've waited 4 letters for 4 weeks for a letter. Well, you're going to, because it's got to go through a process. And people were sort of like trying to do a bit of service and then, going to, I know Paul was, he was getting on trains and doing these workshops and there's 3 people sitting there, travelling to Bournemouth or Bristol or whatever and, and there's no one there. And then you go out, and I've had a lot of this, I'd go out and go, oh yeah, I applied for that prison sponsorship, didn't hear nothing. I go, oh right, okay, did you? And you've got to put up with that continuously. Now what we do, the whole thing, we've got logs for everything. So if you've applied or a prisoner sent in one of these cards, we've got it all logged so it can be followed up. So if anyone's had any problems with prison sponsorship, get in touch with the committee and we can find out what's gone wrong. Because there is, it's the prison postal system. Sometimes they don't let the letters through. We've got the postal system, they've got UK Service Office. So there's a lot to go wrong, but we can sort of cover it. Anyway, it really struggled and it nearly folded. You know, it nearly folded. People were using the service, but it still nearly folded. You know, I went to the 28 days clean. I went to the Bristol Convention, you know, and I was nuts when I got here. You know, really not well. You know, and there was this young fella there, and he was one of the first prison sponsees. You know, I was like, I think 28 days clean, and they was all talking to this kid, and he had day release, and his prison sponsor had picked him up and brought him to the convention. You know, and I was like, I didn't really know what was going on at the time, to be honest. You know, it's sort of something that I've reflected on about 4 years later. You know, but I just remember thinking what an amazing thing, you know, that we got, you know, that someone's being picked up from prison, brought out, you know, to a convention. And when he was released, his prison sponsor met him at the gate. You know, that's what prison sponsorship sort of does. And in 2005, 2010, it nearly folded again, you know, and there was 4 of us on the committee, you know, and then, you know, they all had commitments. Paul did service, you know, he was chair when it first came about, and then he stepped down. No one do service, so he stepped up, you know. I think in about 10 years he did chair 8 times because there was no one else to do service. You know, he wouldn't let this go. He wouldn't let it go. And in 2010, there was 4 of us on the committee. 4 of us did, you know, we did commitments for 4 years continuous, you know, and Paul was still there at the chair, still doing what, you know, not letting it go, you know, and I'm grateful for that. You know, it was tough, you know. I can tell you my experience about, you know, the early days of that, around 2010. You know, my sponsor, Paul, he said, you've got to get involved with service. Now, I was nuts. You've got to remember this. You know, I was double paranoid. I thought NNA was a conspiracy anyway. I thought, what is going on here? You know, I was in a state of trauma from my using, and I didn't even know. And I was absolutely petrified. I didn't know that either. You know, and he said, right, you know, get involved with service. So I thought, right, okay, right. I said that to his face, but in my head I was thinking, what's he getting me to do all this for? You know, and then when he said, can you sort this and do that, I thought, he's getting me to do all this dirty work here. This is dodgy, you know what I mean? But I was so scared. I was so, you know, I just did it anyway. And what we used to do, he said, right, what are we going to do? We're going to go to the prison sponsorship meeting, you know, and he said, it's in London, and it's Liverpool Street McDonald's, last Thursday of the month, right, at 6 o'clock in the evening, right? So I thought to myself, so I'm at home and I'm thinking, yeah, we can do this. A few deep breaths, we can do this. I don't know what it's about, you know, got the whole head going, but I thought I could do it. So I get on the train, you know, and as I'm getting there, I think, oh, I don't know about this. And then we meet up in McDonald's, and there were these, you know, other guys there, and I'd be sitting in that meeting thinking, what is this about? What is this? You know, that mad head, 1,000,000 thoughts a minute, you know, self-obsessed to the core, paranoid, looking round and everything. And they went, right, we're going to start the meeting. And all of a sudden they went, right, and we're sitting in a table in McDonald's. They went, right, now hold hands and we do the serenity prayer. Oh, I feel that. Every time I say it, I feel it. I feel it goes right. I think, oh. And it was, you know, I really feel in that one, you know. And I didn't know what to do, you know. It's like, well, I can't not do it because I'm too scared to, you know. They were doing it. There's a fella sitting there, one 20 years, one 8 years. I'm thinking, well, they're doing it, just do it. And where'd you look? When you're fully self-obsessed, paranoid, where'd you look? Do you look in the circle? Do you look out the circle? You know, it's like, try not to make eye contact. Do you make eye contact? Oh, shit, I made eye contact, you know. And it's absolutely horrendous, you know. And we're only doing this serenity prayer, you know. And then, you know, within seconds, you know, we did the serenity prayer. I thought, oh, thank God for that, that's over. And within seconds, they said, we need a secretary and you're it. All right? I thought, oh, is that how we voting? You know, and so then, you know, I had the next manoeuvre. I've now got to take minutes in a meeting in McDonald's with a pen and a paper on the table. How am I going to do that without 300 people seeing it? You know what I mean? It was, it was horrendous. But you know, what I learned from that, you know, I didn't know what was going on at the time. I thought I was being bullied. I thought it was a conspiracy. I thought someone was pulling a move. I thought I was having the piss taken out of me. You know, all of that stuff. I didn't know someone was teaching me about service. Someone was teaching me about getting out of self. Someone was teaching me about carrying a message. I didn't know it at the time. You know, and I remember, I can feel this and all. I used to get on that train and I used to go home and I'd sort of sit there looking at people, you know, and they'd all be coming home from work and I just want to sit there and put my head in my hands and go, I just wanted to get clean. What is all this about? You know, I had no idea. And I'd get home and I remember this as well and I think, oh, thank God I ain't got to do that for another month. 2 weeks into the month and it's on me. Oh no, the Serenity Prayer's coming again, you know. You know, and I did that. I look back now, I think I don't know how I did it. It was literally one foot in front of the other, you know. But and that was around 2010. And in 2010, you know, we become prison sponsorship, went back to Region, and for whatever reason, they become part of H&I. And in 2010, it became UK H&I prison sponsorship, you know, and that's what, you know, that's what Paul wanted from the beginning. It's what he held on to, you know. And I remember when we had a discussion about it, you know, and he was like, yes, prison sponsorship has now arrived. 5 years of everyone trying their best, doing what they do. We know it's the growth period now. It had to happen, you know. It's the way things work in NA, you know, and they'd reached H&I, you know, and so now, you know, we was having those meetings. We was having those meetings sort of dotted all over the place and different McDonald's and that. And because now we're part of H&I, what happened was that they said, you know, you can't be having your meetings at McDonald's. You know, you've got to come to the UK H&I. You know, and my truth at the time is like, oh, I didn't want to go. You know, I didn't want to go. I had memories. I'm thinking, steer away from any committee meetings because that emotional state around the Serenity Prayer at McDonald's is going to haunt me, and I'm not ever going through that again, you know, because I didn't know it was going to be different. Anyway, prison sponsorship, you know, we'd all done service. There were 2 other fellas that had their commitments for 4 years, and in the end they just had to walk away and there was no one to do service, and we sort of held it up, the commitments, you know, and we got a vote of no confidence, you know, because prison sponsorship weren't attending UK H&I, you know, and I was like gutted. You know, and so were the others. They'd been doing their commitments, turning up month after month after month, doing the service, sending the letters out, sending the welcome packs out, taking the complaints, you know, doing shares, whatever it was they were doing. They got a vote of no confidence, you know, and I remember, so I did the secretary, and I do stuff a bit obsessively, surprise, surprise. And, you know, I turned up at every meeting and done the minutes for 4 years. And then you get a vote of no confidence. I thought, what's that about? You know, what is that about? You know, and normally you think, oh, a vote of no confidence, negative thing. No, it was an absolute positive thing because what it did, it propelled prison sponsorship into action, you know. And I had to make that plunge and I had to step up, you know, and go to the meeting and be accountable. You know, be accountable as prison sponsorship, you know. And the reason why it was about was because there was questions being answered and no one could answer them. You know, because no one knew in H&I about UK H&I about prison sponsorship, so they needed the committee there, you know. And I can tell you from that, you know, I went to that H&I meeting, I went with Paul, we both went there, and I sat there. I was waiting for the Serenity Prayer, but it was all right there, it weren't too bad, you know, and I was inspired. I was inspired by these people that I was sitting with, you know. I was a little bit intimidated, I'll tell you the truth about that, and very fearful, but that's just my story. But I was inspired, you know, totally. These people were turning up month after month. And they like the people that I sort of think that they go to more than any lengths. They were talking about, you know, prisoners getting free basic texts, you know, talking about going to different prisons all around the country and stuff like that. And I was like, wow, you know, this is what this is about. This is what this is about. So now, you know, off the back of that, you know, vote of no confidence, and we turn up there. You know, I've been to UK H&I prisons, the H&I meeting, you know, every month. You know, that's what prison sponsorship attend now, you know, and it's the prison sponsorship meeting that never really had a place, you know, because back in the day, Region gave an amount of money, but when it was falling apart, they took the money back. So it was, for a few years, prison sponsorship was self-funded by committee members, you know, to try and hold it. You know, that was, you know, sort of thanks to Paul, because he wouldn't let it go, you know, he would not let it go. So, you know, we never really could afford to have, you know, that's why it was in the McDonald's. But now, you know, through being part of H&I, you know, the prison sponsorship meeting is the first Sunday of the month, 11 till 12 at the Gordon Hospital, which is just before the UK H&I meeting, you know, and we have that meeting. Of that vote of no confidence, you know, what that did was put me into action, you know. It propelled me. That's what it was about. You know, I had to be accountable. Am I going to stand up and do this stuff, or am I going to talk about it in the shadows, you know? And I stood up. And what happened off the back of that? People stepped up to do service. And we got a committee, you know, a new committee together. You know, and it's gone, you know, it's really exploded. You know, it really has. We started doing these workshops, you know. Convention committees started to see that, yeah, well, let's put H&I on here. Let's do these workshops because it's really important, you know. And since then, like I say, we've got a committee, we have the regular meetings, you know, and it's working, you know, it's working. I hear experience of prison sponsors, you know, and you're going to hear of sponsees, you know, it's just magical, you know. I hear, you know, with people doing service, you know, outside. If you want to be a prison sponsor, you know, you just need experience of working the 12 steps, 2 years clean time, and a sponsor yourself. You know, and people are getting, you know, they're getting involved with that. Because, you know, my experience of being on it back in about 2011, you know, is we've got this thing, we're getting these request cards coming through from prisons, right? And I always see these request cards as like a window of opportunity. You all know what that's about, you know. Sometimes they're very small and very limited, you know, and they come through. About 2011, you know, the committee got together and we had a sponsee waiting in jail, right, where there was no sponsor for him, you know, and I feel this, right. The committee asked me to put a letter together to send to the sponsee in jail to apologise that there is no sponsors available at the moment, right, and as soon as we get a sponsor, we will allocate you a sponsor. Now, what does that say about our fellowship, our great, wonderful fellowship? There's a fellow in jail, sent a request card, sent a welcome pack, and I've got to send him a letter going, there's no one to sponsor you, mate. Just hang on. I hope you're all right, you know. And that's, what's that about? You know. So if you can sponsor, and that's what these little cards are, if you meet the requirements on there, or you know someone that does, you know, get involved. It's not, you know, it's not like you don't get 20 letters a week. You know, it's like sort of 1 or 2 letters. You know, and you can make a difference. You know, I've had people that have had really bad days and they've come home and they've seen on the mat there's a letter from their prison sponsee, you know, and it's turned their day round. You know, I've got a bit of my personal experience around that, you know, about sponsoring someone in jail, you know, and it's amazing service, amazing. You know, I ain't got time to get into it, but, you know, I'll share about it. You know, through prison sponsorship, you know, I've sponsored a few people. I've never sponsored someone who went, you know, behind the door, never have. You know, until about 9 months ago, one of my sponsees who, you know, he struggles, 3 years in and out of this fellowship, fighting the fight, you know, few days, few weeks, back in, then in Nick, back out, going to turn it round, like, you know the story, you know, and ended up going away again, and he wanted it. He hit that sort of desperation. He said, what are we going to do? And I said, I know exactly what we're going to do. We're going to do it like prison sponsorship. You're going to do it. You can do your step work in Nick, you know, and I sent him in, you know, the step work. A little bit different for me because I knew him, so I could go and visit him. You know, the relationship was already progressed, you know, and he did a 1, 2, 3 in prison. You know, I told him to keep hold of his step work. I said, don't be sending it out to me because I can visit. We was doing talks, you know, we was talking in the visits, you know, and he did a 1, 2, 3 in there. It was only a short sentence. So I said to him, don't send it out. We're going to do the step work when you come out, but just keep doing it, you know, and he smashed it. You know, he was at that place of desperation, you know, and what you lot showed me to do, what H&I told me to do is, you know, be there, be of service, you know. So when I picked him up from prison, and this is like the miracles of NA. I picked him up from prison, all he had was a bag in his hand. You've heard the story a million times, you know, you've heard it a million times. He had nowhere to go. Nowhere, you know, local authorities said, go and sleep on the street and we'll pick you up next Friday. You know, that was it. You know that one. And And I did what you lot suggested to do, you know, and I was there and I took him to meetings, you know. He's now, you know, a couple of weeks ago he celebrated 9 months clean. 9 months clean. He's wrote a massive step forward, right? Massive step forward. It's all in there, you know. He's put his heart and soul in it, you know, off the back of that sentence, and the 1, 2, 3. You know, we're halfway through a 5 at the minute, you know. And he's got in with an organisation with his home and all that because he done the right thing and he got to meetings and he stayed clean, you know. He rung me up last week and they took him on a retreat, right? And he's standing on the banks of Loch Ness, right, looking out across Loch Ness, and he's rung me up. And he just said, I don't believe this. You know, I don't believe it. And I remember what my sponsor used to say to me, you know, anyone that's been about for quite a while, you know, they sort of say, well, yeah, that's what happens when you do what you do in NA. You know, you work this program, that's what happens. You know, he was so grateful, you know. And how do you get, he said to me, he said, how do you get from a prison cell on a retreat on the banks of Loch Ness within 9 months? He said, how'd you do that? You know, and I guess you do it, I sort of keep coming back, you know, and do it because of the service that we do in NA, you know, for them people, you know, because we are them people, you know, and I'm passionate about this. I'm passionate about NA. Why wouldn't I be? It saved my life, you know. I met some wonderful people. I met my sponsor. That sponsor I took away, he passed away. And he passed away last year too early, you know, and this is his hometown, London, you know. Every year I'd meet him at this convention. You know, I did a share in the back room a couple of years ago. He sat right in front of me. I found it a bit intimidating, but it was funny. But, you know, it's the likes of him, you know, the people like that, you know, that would not give up. And that's what I've learned, because I can give up really, really easily. You know, I can buy into the shit and the bullshit very easily. You know, it's people like that that continue to do service against all odds, you know. And now we're sitting here doing this workshop, you know, and people, you know, saving lives. You know, someone said it at the last workshop we did. We now have another tool in our NA toolkit called prison sponsorship, which saves people's lives behind the door. So I'm going to let these other two fellas speak now. So thanks for letting me share.
Thank you for that, Darren. Now I'm going to introduce you to Renee, who's one of our beloved sponsors.
Yeah, thanks, John. My name's Renee, and I'm an addict.
Hello.
And yeah, I'm a little bit controversial. I've got a cup of coffee here, so hope you suffer that. A couple of props here, air products, stuff like that. Cheese and onion sandwich, in case I get the feeling I might want to eat, and it's creating a dilemma already, you know, water or coffee. But anyway, you know, I kind of got this. I like the sort of clunky sort of way we put things together. You know, there's a bit of clunkiness in it. It's not a judgment, it's just an observation. And it's, you know, with regards to some subcommittee meetings that I've attended, you know, and quite a lot of feelings surface, you know, anger being one of my personal favourites. And one that I've had to learn to live with and be with, etc., etc., etc. But I just want to have a look at that, because I had a look while Darren was speaking. Thanks, Darren, for that. It was, you know, I was feeling that. I was feeling my own feelings and everything else that was going on. And, you know, I can't, we can. So that's kind of reassuring, because sitting here, there was a time I thought, you know, I want to come up here. You know, I want to come up here and do something. And then you get here and you think, well, I think, no, I don't want to be here. Don't want to be here now. You know, I kind of want to be, you know, I've got the disease of I want to be anywhere but here right now, you know. Yeah, a bit like that. And I haven't got any, you know, I don't know. I see these, I've got props, but I've got you as, I suppose, you know, it's not a demeaning term, but you're my props, you know. I can't, we can. These guys here, God of my understanding, etc. And with all that, I still feel quite nervous, you know what I mean, and feel a little bit kind of, you know, feelings are quite physical for me, you know. I kind of sometimes get to such a point where I feel almost choked by them, you know. I remember coming here a few years ago, so I've just jumped from that loose end, whoops, to, I was in a room over there or over there or over there sometime a few years ago, 2007 I think, possibly. I was about 3 years clean. Might have been 2008, but they had a prison sponsorship workshop or committee meeting or something. I remember Paul G. I remember a guy called Ken now, and I remember that I'd wandered into it, and you know, I knew Ken and this other guy, Paul. I sort of connected to that life spirit, you know, that vibrancy, and I kind of, you know, I was touched by that stuff, you know, like that passion and that enthusiasm. So, you know, I wandered back to where I was living at the time. I was part of the West Midlands area, very lovely area. If you ever visit it, Birmingham's in it. And I used to attend a meeting called Walsall anyway, and I was at home the one night, and you know, I got onto a very nice website at the time called the UKNA website, which was a vibrant community, you know, of addicts, and it was a safe place because you'd be behind the screen and people would get quite, you know, sometimes hostile, threads would get pulled, etc., etc. But it was on now that, apart from meeting my sponsor who lives up in that Outer Hebrides, and sometimes I think best place for him, but I love him very much, you know what I mean? And we just had a conversation earlier, and you know, wish me luck, you know. Yeah, Carl, I need some of that. But anyway, it's just have faith. You know, it's easy, isn't it? Just have faith. You'll be all right, you know. So yeah, I'll take a little bit of that. It will be all right. It is all right, you know. Yeah. So I went back to the computer. So I'm on the UKNA website, and you know, and probably withdrawing from a particular thread, probably about H&I. One of them was about, I remember years ago, was something about the Maverick letter was going to be, anyway, you know, it's another story. So moving away from that, and this was before, and I clicked on this thing out, become a prison sponsee or sponsor. So I had this questionnaire at the time, and it was like, it was quite intrusive, really. I found it intrusive. I thought, you know, what happened to Just for a Day? My thoughts would be on my recovery, you lot, you know, because you're asking me personal questions. Have I done a step 5? I thought, you know, what a liberty, you know. So anyway, so I got this, so I answered the questions, and then it was, and have you got a sponsor? You know, yeah, I've got a sponsor. What's going on here, like, you know, so they wanted his phone number. So I thought, so I phoned my sponsor up. I said, look, they got this for me, and they're asking me all sorts of questions. It feels like as if I'm under interrogation, you know, but anyway, I suppose, you know, it was quite an important position, I suppose, and I suppose it required some kind of safety element to it. Do you know what I mean? So I kind of let that go, and filled out the form, and I got my first prison sponsee, and this guy had been away for 23 years, and you know, unlike myself, who'd been away for shoplifting and things like that, you know, perhaps acquisitive crime, and you know, essentially the odd occasion when I threw my toys out the pram and smashed up the social security or something like that. You know, just it was a serious thing, you know what I mean? So we started writing, and we built up a relationship. I remember his writing was really hard to read, and you know, what does that say? And I was so, but I didn't feel like sort of sending him a letter. Look, mate, you know, you're going to have to sort of type this, or you know, because I can't read your writing. It's terrible, you know. It's the last thing I'm going to say. So I got what I could from it, and there was you know, there was enough there to suggest that he wanted it. I'm trying to get it, while you were sharing, I was trying to get my head into the place of what it must be like being an inmate. And the only moment I had sort of, I was in Idown once. I ain't going to do they call them a drug-a-log. I ain't going to do a jail-a-log here, but it's just part of the background stuff. And I was in there and I come across our basic text, The blue cover had been ripped off, you're in jail, it's what happens, isn't it? And I looked at it, I had a little read. Narcotics, that drew me to it. Narcotics Anonymous. I'd come across that term before a long time ago, late 70s, early 80s. My mate mentioned it. I thought it was a place where you get drugs in secret. And it might be handy when I'm struggling, but and I didn't realise it was this stuff. And it was, later on I learned that it was just taken off in the early 80s. But I'm meandering a bit. Let's get back to, anyway. So I read it and I threw it across the cell in complete and utter frustration. I was angry, I was lonely. My partner, wife or girlfriend, whoever it was at the time, out of sight, out of mind. She was an addict. You know what I mean? The focus of her attention, ceased to be me. It was like, she needed to get some gear, and it was difficult. I thought it was difficult anyway. And so anyway, so this guy. So we'd exchange letters, and recovery's not always. It's not. There's bumps in the road, isn't there? And so I felt safe enough to disclose through the letters, the correspondence, and I just felt it right to sort of be real. And I was telling him one day that I was, I'd been struggling. My brother had passed away nearly 7 years ago, and I think it was around about that time, in due course, I got a letter of this guy, Mark, his name was, and I read his letter and what he's up to, and he identified with where I was at, and he signed off, and it just blew me away. He signed off, in struggle, Mark. And it was at that moment that I realised that this ain't just about me being there for them and helping them, those that are behind the walls. This is like a two-way street. This guy was with me. He heard me in my letter, and that was really important as well. It weren't just, my ego can, there was a time I remember I was going to exaggerate. I was going to say I was 6 months clean and I had about 400 sponsees. I didn't. That's a lie, It was 300. But anyway. But there was a time when I thought, save the world. And, you still... Well, I still feel enthusiastic about this stuff. You know what I mean? I still feel passionate. And I love the way that prison sponsorship has been kind of shoehorned into the UKHNI subcommittee. That's pretty awesome. From small beginnings, you know what I mean? And stuff like that. And... and I was getting emails from other committee members, and about things, perhaps, and I was reading the minutes from Region and our you read about the health of your interest, don't you? So my interest at the time was both UKHNI and how the Prison Sponsorship Committee was doing. God, I'm forming an attachment right close to this, right intimate with this thing here, and I want to be... Can you hear me like that? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can now, okay. I'm going to have to put up with this and I suffer the... whatever it is. Swallow it. Who said that? Excuse me. Not going to be doing that, not up here anyway. But anyway, So that just, it was one of the moments where just evoked a few tears and stuff like that. And I was saying, I went to my partner at the time, I said, look at this guy, and this is awesome. This guy supported me. So, I mean, what happened during those times? I did get, I had a book, A4, I had all these addresses. I was getting all these prison sponsees, and my experience around it is that you do write to people, and they don't write back. Even the first time, they'll write you, and they want this and want that, and okay, and you write back to them, and you don't hear again. And But my thought around that, and I heard this years ago, you know, it was at the European Convention in Wales, Llandudno, and I heard someone talk about the power of our literature and I suppose the power of the message, you know what I mean? So, you know, so it just dawned on me that, you know, and same as with H&I, when you go into the jail, you'll say something to someone or you'll write a letter to someone and, you know, and what's that, mate? You know, it's pad, mate, and oh, it's a letter from, you know, or I've just been to an NA meeting, or, you know, up the landing or wherever it is, you know what I mean? Wherever they have, and it's varied, isn't it? The location. But, you know, so while the person who attends or the person who receives the letter might not, at that point, get recovery or might not ever get recovery, someone else might hear about us secondhand, you know, that's like, you know, so, you know, when you lay a bit of literature on a train, sort of like accidentally on purpose, you know, or stuff like that, you know, little cards here and there, you know, them little blue ones, the helpline number, I've done a bit of that, and, you know, with a little prayer, then you never know who that's going to reach, you know, it could be a straight goer, if they still call them that, who picks it up and go, oh, my mate Johnny, he could do with this, you know, and then Johnny has it, and then he, you know, could end up third hand down the road and leaves it on a tea table or somewhere, and a visitor comes in and, God, that's, you know, nicks it, reads it later, uses it for roach, but logs the number, you know, and then a bit of a journey, that, wasn't it? But it is a journey, isn't it? It was a journey for me to get, and I remember it quite well. You know, I kind of, you know, I come here busted, you know, and I was trying to sort of, you know, so back to the book and throwing it across the cell, you know, I suppose being in jail and being absolutely desperate and knowing there's another way might be a good starting point. I don't know, but you know, and I want to hold my hands up. You know, I'm human. You know, you can rely on me to be unreliable, even though I'm sitting here. You know, there's some. You know, I mean, the last thing at the UK thing, there was. I was meant to be there, and I thought I want to play football, and then I was getting a phone call. I think Frankie Morris, you know, you need. And I come in all sweating. There was an empty chair at the end, and I got in there. And then at that time we had Delroy's letters, you know, and that was that one, wasn't it? And that was that's when, you know, it was getting out there that this is impact sort of first hand, but without the soul there present, but it was present, you know, through the words. You know, and how that happened was, you know, asked for permission. It weren't like, you know, just waving people's letters around and, you know, you need a bit of permission. And because what I was getting from Delroy in the early days was you know, by this time I'm living on my own now, you know, and such is life, you know, things changed, don't they? And, you know, you make choices and you got to live with them, and, you know, I think they're quite good choices. Sometimes I think, what did I do there? But, you know, but here we are, here right now. And, you know, I'll be reading one of the letters, and it would be just full of gratitude, just full of, like, just oozing. And I'll be getting a pink highlighter and going, look at that, and look, and there'd be tears running down my face. You know, I'll be alone in the bedroom, and then I'll phone my sponsor out at Hebrides, and I said, you want to hear this stuff, man? This is like, you know, and it was the way, it was on one occasion, and perhaps a couple of occasions since, but I think there was one occasion where, you know, I received a letter, and it was signed off. It said, if you don't mind me saying, because I've heard it before, it said, doing life, but loving life, you know, and that just crippled me, you know, in a nice way, if you can be crippled in a nice way, emotionally kind of, I was just kind of floored, you know what I mean, and that really touched something deep within me, you know, and they'd always come, you know, those sort of moments always seem to come when I'm having a day like that, you know, I'm having that day when I'm disconnected, I'm feeding my disease, if you like, or my negativity, whatever you choose to call it. Awesome. Because in the beginning, I was thinking, where's the fire exit or the trap door and all that? But I'm getting quite comfortable now. I don't really need this cheese and onion sandwich, if anyone's hungry. But anyway, so, and that would be, so back to that, I was kind of, I was just moved by the old process. And, you know, as time's gone on, I've got more busy, and I kind of, a lot of the people have faded away. And then I kind of, this new committee, you guys and people doing what they're doing now, and it seemed to take on what do they call it, a new lease of life, right? And I was noticing it, you know, through various kind of mediums, okay? And I thought, God, yeah, and the spark, it was just returning to me. So what I did was, you know, I took on another sponsee, sent some step work in, got that back, fed that back. You know, each question identified with, or same as that, and then said where I'm at, apologised for the delay. That's what I want to get to, about my unreliability. We kind of got a contract which kind of, you know, says that we write back quite swiftly. You know, because I know it's like to be forgotten. I kind of touched on that earlier, but sometimes I am a little bit on my hands up. I am over the deadline, you know. And, well, I apologise to them always as the person who needs the apology. But, you know, when you're talking about some of the things that can, you know, perhaps has the potential to derail something, you know, I need to take my own inventory, you know, I need to sort of like get that right, you know what I mean? You know, because I've got this habit of looking at what everyone else is doing and how wrong they're doing it, you know what I mean? And that just puts some massive dents in my spirit, you know. It's just the way it is. I don't know, I think they call it a default setting in the trade, you know. You know, and, you know, it's like my brain's hemorrhaging with resentment, you know what I mean? I get it now. But, so, yeah, so spiritual solution and all the rest of it. You know, it keeps me connected. Keeps me connected, you know. I'm coming up to, just going to finish on this. I'm coming up to a landmark next month, and I'm thinking, and it happened last year, and all, you know. And I'm thinking, oh, I'm all right now. I'm kind of pretty normal, you know. You guys are kind of, you know, I've heard you in meetings, and you sound like a bit crazy, like you're in a mess, and could do with some help. And I'm all right. My girlfriend's a straight goer. She said, God, you know, I have to do a lot of meetings, you know. And so I thought I was kind of paraphrasing and reflecting that, you know, some trained counsellor, but I kind of got this wrong. I said, you saying that I can have a drink? She said, no, I didn't say that. So anyway, with that, yeah, I want to hand it over to our next speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Renee. That gives me really great pleasure to hand it over to introduce you to Delroy.
Yeah, my name's Del. I'm an addict. What I've lacked my whole life is power, so I have to turn over my will to the care of God, else I can't do this stuff on the stage. And there's a quote that I'd like to start with. Freedom is not something that can be given. Freedom is something that people take, and people are as free as they want to be. So even though I've been behind the door 12 years, and I don't say that from any pedestal, I just say that because it's my truth. I'm a free man, you know. I go briefly into my story, alcoholic father, all that self-pity stuff. I'm not going to talk about that at all. I'm just going to mention it. But I've been on the streets of London, homeless up and down the street, chasing dealers, needles on my arms, in and out of hospital, 6 months to live, just all that crap. Ended up going to Bristol, a rehab down there, held on for DLI for 3 months, thought it'd be a good idea to get in a relationship, ended up with a life sentence. And I'm not, you know, it's nothing to do with the girl that I was with. It was just me and my mad thinking. And life was very painful, me in prison. I'm not going to lie. And I just could not stop using for love nor money. And it got to the point where I took so much drugs over a period of 3 days that I ended up in the block. And, excuse me, but I had drugs hidden somewhere. And I think this was my lowest point because I thought my mum was outside the door screaming, saying, "What's happening to you?" And then I thought my dad was there, even though he was dead, but I was convinced they were there. So the screws had stripped me naked, so I'm naked in this cell with my finger up my chad, trying to get the rest of the drugs out of my arse. He looks through the flap and just looks at me like I'm doing something else. And the embarrassment, I was just like, oh my God. But I just wanted the drugs out of there. And the next day they took me for adjudication. I'm sitting at the desk, I've got a screw there, and I've got a screw there. Actually, prison officers, I prefer to call them that. And the governor's sitting on the other side of the table, and I jumped up on the table and tried to attack him. Then they took me to healthcare. Stripped down naked again, pissed all over the walls, because I didn't want them to come in, because I was convinced they were sharpening machetes to come and kill me. But what they were doing was making toast. Every time I heard that toaster scrape, I'm thinking of machetes. And it was only after about a week I was thinking, that's the fucking toaster. So every time I took drugs, I was getting ill effects from them. They stopped taking away the feelings of emotional pain, and I weren't getting high anymore. And I was working in this workshop, pulling around this trolley, and I'd be out my nut, but I was convinced I wasn't. And people would say, "You had a good day today?" I go, "No, it was shit." And they go, "You were out of it?" I go, "No, I weren't." And I'd argue with them that drugs weren't doing anything. And he said, "Well, why'd you do them?" And I went, "I don't know. I just didn't have a clue why I used and why I couldn't stop using." So I tried all various ways of using all different things and saving up drugs for days, but what happened was the anticipation of taking drugs was actually better than taking drugs. Then I'd smash myself to pieces, get to the end of the day, I'd have all food all over my cell, I'd be laying on the floor, a screw would look through the flap, and he wouldn't even open the door or anything, because he'd just leave me where I was, because I was in such a hopeless state, but people given up. So I'd done this detox, went on naltrexone, and it gave me a little break from the opiates and the heroin and all that crap. And it took another addict to say, "This is what you look like." And he showed me another guy who was to hang around with in the same state as me. And I started to see what I actually looked like. I got this moment of clarity from somewhere, and I think today is God. And I went on a sentence planning board and I said to him, "Please help me, I've got a drug problem." They said, "Oh, you've done the Focus program." And I used all the way through this program, and I was just begging them, and they said, "No, what you need to do, you need to train for work." I said, "How the fuck am I going to train for work with a drug problem?" They went, "Well, this is the only way you're going to get parole." Now, I know this is not the steps, but I wrote to the RAP program, and my life just took off like a rocket from there, because I got moved to a BCAT prison. But before I'd left, I wrote to 202 City Roads, and I would like to everyone for a round of applause for City Roads, because they saved my life. And I remember getting this first letter from a geezer called Joe. Well, that's what he said his name was, and when I phoned him years later, I go, "Hello, Joe," and he went, "Who's Joe?" So one of the first things that stood out for me was that he said, "God permits us to be angry." And I knew this meant something to me, but I didn't know what it meant. So I started reading the basic text, I read around it, and I just didn't understand it. And I was reading it over and over and over again, thinking, what the fuck does this mean? And I wrote back to him, and he said, if I can remember, that you and I will make the odd Rick, and when we can understand this, our level of expectation diminishes. And I thought, fucking hell, that means a lot, because that explains me and how I see fault in everyone, but people make mistakes, and so do I. I've been to prison 16 times, and I never ever thought that I could come out of prison and live a proper life. But today I have faith that I can do that through working this program. And what this program has given me, it's given me within 7 months of not taking drugs. I'm speaking to my grandmother on the phone, and I've got all these people around me, and I've just come back from the gym, and I'm quite pumped up, and I'm full of ego and all that. And my grandmother says to me, "We always knew you were good. We've been waiting for you." And I was fucking choked. I was like, "Yeah, sweet, man. All right, I'll see you later." Boom, put the phone down. Got to my cell, and I was just like spun out. And I saw my focal counsellor the next day, and I was trying to say this one word over and over again, because I told her what my grandmother had said, and I was going, fa, and I couldn't get the word out, and she went to spit it out. And I went, "Family," and all these tears pissed out of me. And I could not stop crying, because I finally had that level of acceptance that my nan is not going to get buried one day and think her grandson is fucked, because her grandson has recovered from a hopeless state of mind. What a wonderful thing. And there's been little tiny details that have helped me through having a prison sponsor. Like the first time I got a mobile phone, I've only ever had one mobile phone my whole life. And what I did is I smoked that phone after about 2 weeks, and I phoned everyone I could, and then couldn't pay the bill, and then sold it for crack. So when I got my first mobile phone, it was only like an £8 one. I didn't know how to use it. I didn't even know how to turn it on. I couldn't unlock it, and I had to get someone to help me. And I phoned this man over here running, and I said, I'm fucked. I can't use a phone. He went, nah, it's all right. He said, I was exactly the same. And I've met so many other people who have been the same, but I think that all my problems are just me, because I'm so self-absorbed. And yeah, this is what's happened in the 3 years. Now, I'm 3.5 years clean, but it really means nothing. Being 3.5 years clean means nothing to me, really, because what's really important is that I sponsor others. And I'm sponsoring someone at the moment, and his cell has completely changed. He's clean, he gets up at 4:30, he does his prayers, he does his readings, he sells food up with food, his bed's made, but more importantly, the lights have come on in his eyes. That when I see him, I can walk past him on the other side of the landing, and he knows what I'm thinking, and I know what he's thinking, because we've both got that bit of gratitude. And I say, you on solid ground? And he went, I'm on solid ground. And that's how we walk within the prison. And that's what's happened to me, that I've managed to connect with people who are suffering, and I'm helping others, and in turn they're helping them. So if recovery stopped at the gate, we'd all be fucked in prison, because there'd be nothing. You'd have these little programs and that, but it's not enough. We need the real deal. We need the real steps, not 1 to 5.